Hey, I'm Skip Bedell. Today we're going to be installing these Barron Designs faux wood and faux stone panels to the front of this home's exterior. Now these panels are awesome because they look and feel like real wood and real stone, but they're super easy to install. So today we're going to show you how to do that, but before we get started, let's talk about some of the tools you're going to need to get the job done right. Be sure to always wear protective eyewear. You'll need a pencil, a T-square, tape measure, drill driver, chalk line, saw with a finished blade, a level, a stapler with exterior grade staples, exterior screws, a caulk gun, Loctite PL adhesive, color match textured caulk, a tack cloth, a clean rag, your touch-up kit, and a small paintbrush. Before we get started installing our Barron Design panels to this home's exterior, because it is an exterior installation, the manufacturer recommends that we install this drainage mat that we got from Barron Designs over our house wrap. It's important to have any flashing and house wrap installed first, and then the drainage mat goes over that. So as you can see, there's a flat side. This is going to face out with a corrugated side in toward the house. And the purpose of this is to allow any moisture that gets behind the siding to drain down to the bottom, but it also allows any air and vapors inside the house to escape so the house can breathe. So we're going to go ahead and staple this up, and then we can get started laying out our panels. Orient the roll so that the grid side faces the wall and the smoother side faces out. Fasten the drainage mat to the wall using exterior grade staples that are long enough to pass through the mat and the house wrap and into the structural material below. Adhesive will not be used when installing over the house wrap. Now that we have our drainage mat installed, the next step would normally be to start laying out and installing our panels. Now, Barron Design also makes available optional trim pieces for the stone and the wood. So whenever you're installing trim pieces around the doors and windows, you want to go ahead and install all your trim first before the panels. So I'm going to show you how to measure and cut and install the trim first, then we'll get to laying out our panels. You'll need to measure, mark, and cut the trim pieces as needed. Now that I've got all my trim pieces cut to size, I'm going to put them on the wall and dry fit them, make sure everything lines up right. And then before I adhere them with the glue and the screws, I want to take a tack cloth and wipe the back of the trim pieces to remove any sawdust and loose debris to make sure we get good adhesion to the wall. Now that the trim pieces have been dry fitted, you can apply 2 beads of adhesive to the back of the trim. Set the trim pieces in place and use a slight twisting motion to ensure good contact. Next, fasten the trim to the wall by placing a screw every 16 inches as needed. Slightly recess the screw and don't over tighten. Now that we have our trim pieces installed, we have to orient our panels. So we're going to start out with the stone panels on the lower portion of the installation. Now, as you can see on these panels, there's a side that has fingers that projects out, and then there's a slot side. So first we need to determine which side is the finger side. As you can see on these stone panels, it's on the left-hand side. So that means we're going to be running our design from left to right. Now we can't start out with the fingers into the trim like that, leaving a space. So we're going to take our first panel and we're going to cut off about 1/4 of this panel, leaving a square edge that we can start our design with. Always running our pattern from left to right because our fingers are on the left. That's going to leave our slot side coming out to the right and ready to receive our next piece throughout the whole layout. So once we get the first piece cut, we can run right down the line and keep installing the panels. Now that the panels have been oriented, it's often helpful to establish the order of panels by laying them out prior to starting the installation process. Look at the variation in colors and texture to ensure that no one section draws the eye. Before we cut the fingers and the overall length of this first panel, we also have to figure out the height of the first course because we're going to have a trim ledger piece and we need a full piece at the top. That means our first course is going to be ripped short. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out the measurements on that now. We'll snap a level line and we'll get our first course installed. Place a full-size panel against the wall and mark the height. Then draw a level line the length of the wall. Next, it's time to trim the first panel. Plan this cut based on the overall width of the installation and the total number of panels required to span the wall. It's recommended to cut off at least 1/4 of the panel. Dry fit each panel before applying adhesive to ensure it fits flush and doesn't require any trimming. The last panel on the row will have to be trimmed from the slot side of the panel. Next, wipe all the panels with a tack cloth as well. This will remove any dust and light debris, so when we adhere the panels to the wall, it has a good surface to stick to. Now it's time to apply the adhesive and caulk. Turn the panel over and apply a bead of Loctite PL 3X adhesive to the panel with a bead along the perimeter about 1 inch from the edge, and vertical lines in 4-inch increments along the interior of the panel. Now that we have the fingers cut off the first piece and it ripped to the proper height, as you can see, I installed my adhesive. We got everything clean and ready to go. I'm going to fit this up against the wall, making sure, always being conscious that we're on our level line. You want to twist slightly and apply pressure, twisting until you feel that adhesive grab. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put 1 screw every 12 inches along the top. You want to slightly recess the heads of these screws, but you don't want to over tighten them. That's important. Also, I want to get one around the edges. Again, you don't want to over tighten. You can see it'll bend the product back. So slightly recess it. Then we're going to go ahead and put 1 every foot along the length of the panel. And once we get inside of the stone itself, I like to put the screws up underneath if you can, so it kind of hides it. If you can get it up underneath the stone texture, that'll make it easier to hide later on when we're filling it with the caulk. Slightly recess the head of that screw, and then we're going to come back and we're going to fill all these holes with caulk and color match touch-up paint. Next, add adhesive to the lip of the panel about 1 inch from the face, and also apply a bead of textured caulk where the face meets the panel. Caulk must be added during this step, but all the remaining panels in the course very tightly together while following the level line. There it is, our first course is installed to the right height to give us a full panel. We can go ahead and start installing the second course. For multiple rows, you want to start the next row directly above the first panel, but taking care to offset these seams. The panels are designed to butt up and create a shiplap joint. Before installing the panel on the next row, you want to apply adhesive to the top lip of the panel below. Now that we've finished installing the top course, we can go ahead and install our ledger trim piece that's going to cap off the top. As you can see, I've applied adhesive to the top lip, and this is going to sit right down and lock on top of that top lip. I've measured the lengths, and we cut our first piece, and we're going to set this in by toe screwing through the top. Again, you want to countersink these screws just a little bit. That'll make room for the caulk and our touch-up paint. We've completed the faux stone installation, and as you can see, it looks amazing. Now we're going to transition over to barnwood. We're going to go ahead and trim out the top of the door and the window, and then fill in the middle with barnwood panels. And it's the same installation process with the barnwood. Glue it and screw it, and we'll be done. All right, we're going to press our trim piece up against the wall, and the same thing with the stone. A little twisting motion. Make sure that glue sets in, and we'll go ahead and install our screws. So now we're going to switch over to installing barnwood panels, and as you can see, these are a little bit longer than the stone panels, but it's the same installation process. We're still going to want to orient the panel with the lip facing up, and then determine which side is the fingers, which on the barnwood is over here on the right, and the slot side is on the left. Now for our installation here, we have very short pieces, so it's not going to really be a concern. It's only when you have to butt 2 joints together, like we will up on the top. In this case, with the fingers on the right, that means we're going to start our top design on the right side and work toward the left. So for right now, we're going to measure and cut our panels in the middle here and get started and work our way right up the wall. Now that you've repeated this process all the way up the wall and come to the top row, you most likely will find the top row will need to be trimmed to the correct height before installing. Be sure to go back and fill any joints and seams and screw holes with textured color match caulk, and you can use your color match touch-up painter's kit with a small paintbrush where needed. Wipe off any excess caulk or paint with a damp cloth. Well, that about wraps up our exterior renovation using our Barron Designs faux panels and trim. Now these products were great to work with because they were super easy to install, and as you can see, they look absolutely amazing. Now keep in mind, every installation is unique, so before you get started with yours, you want to be sure to check out their full detailed installation guide, as well as all the great products they have available for your job on their website at barrondesigns.com.